Hey everyone, this is Mazevlog here, and today I'll be teaching you all how to do the vocalized chest bass. Awesome sound. So in today's video, we'll go over what chest bass is, how it works, and how to do chest bass. We'll also go over the different ways to vocalize the chest bass and how vocalized chest bass works. Then I will of course teach you all how to actually perform the vocalized chest bass and what you can do with it. And then we'll top it all off with talking about how to actually train the vocalized chest bass and how to develop that texture. But before we do anything, we have to give the sound a difficulty rating, because how difficult is it to do this sound? How difficult is it to learn this sound? In my opinion, it's not a very difficult sound at all. And I would personally rate it a 4 or a 5 out of 10 on the difficulty scale. Probably a 4 actually. It was one of the first beatbox sounds I ever learned. I remember I learned throat bass. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Evil bass, aka hard bass, aka demon bass. And then I learned vocalized chest bass, and then I learned so that's really saying something. So yeah, I don't think you'll be struggling a lot with this sound. And in this tutorial, I want to provide as much useful information as possible to make learning and working with this sound as straightforward as possible. So step number 1 would be to learn how to do the chest bass. What is the chest bass, right? The chest bass is this sound. Yeah. Whoa, 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 whoa. It's not a very difficult sound at all. And I actually know many people that can already kind of do this sound by default. You hear many people going when they're like frustrated. And the chest bass is actually a sound that's very common in our day-to-day speech. Like it's the sound that we often use to express frustration. Like that deep rattly sigh we all know is actually just chest bass. And I know that many of you have also done the scary voice as a kid, you know, oh my God, I'm so freaking mad right now. And that funny, not so funny, actually truly terrifying voice is just the chest bass. Many people can do it by default. If you can't though, that's totally fine, because as I said, it's not a very difficult sound and you can learn how to do it. Now, what is chest bass like anatomically speaking for the ones that are interested? I personally believe that the chest bass is what happens when a big and heavy muscle in your vocal tract called the epiglottis vibrates. Now, the epiglottis is a pretty massive muscle. It's way bigger than most of the stuff in your vocal tract that can vibrate fairly easily. So when it vibrates, it likes to vibrate at lower frequencies, heavier frequencies, you know. And so that's where that rattle is coming from. As I said, many people can already do this sound by default. And if you are one of those people, then that's really awesome. If you can do this sound, then you've already completed the first step. If you can't do this sound, however, that's totally okay, because there are ways for you to learn this sound. One way would be to just mimic the sound of chest bass. Try to mimic that deep, rattly sigh. You know how when you're very disappointed at someone, you just go. What might help you find this sound is if you take a look at your Adam's apple, if yours is visible. When you do the chest bass with your epiglottis, your Adam's apple goes up a little bit. That's how you know you're using your epiglottis, because let's say you were using your false folds, for example. Like, sure, those sound pretty similar, but when you're using your false folds, your Adam's apple doesn't go up as much as it does with the epiglottis, the chest bass. So that's a little handy thing that can help you identify the sound. If just mimicking the sound of chest bass doesn't work for you, which is totally understandable, by the way, there is another fun way you can learn this sound. And that would be by first doing an impression of Kermit the Frog, right? Okay, so what you want to do here is you want to just take your voice and kind of make it sound a little bit like Kermit the Frog. Now, when doing this, you're looking for this sound. You're not looking for this sound.
And you're also not looking for this sound.
I know many people get confused between Kermit
and Stitch from Lilo and Stitch
and Kermit from whatever he's from. What separates the Kermit voice from the other two voices that people get confused with is Kermit, when you're doing it, you are feeling a little bit of pressure here, though the epiglottis is here, but you still feel a little bit of pressure here. And around this area, if you pay close attention to your throat, you kind of feel the shape of your throat sort of changing a little bit, and you just feel a little bit of light extra pressure around this area in the throat. And I believe that that is because the epiglottis is actually being involved back there.
If you can successfully do the Kermit voice,
then that's awesome. That means we can take it a step further. And so what you want to do now is you want to take the Kermit voice and just get a little more personal with it, you know? Tell Kermit how much you actually hate him, you know? Like,
hey Kermit, I've been meaning to tell you this for a really long time. I can't stand you, Kermit.
when you get a little more personal like that, you will hear a little bit of a rattle. And that rattle is the epiglottis actually starting to vibrate. So first it just works with the voice a little bit to create the funny overtone, and then when you push it, it starts to rattle, and that's precisely what we want. Now, technically, when you're doing an angry Kermit impression like that, you are already doing some form of vocalized chest bass, which is awesome. But for now, let's just take the vocalization out and focus a little more on the chest bass and get to know our chest bass a little more. Just focus on that sound, because we are moving on to step 2 now, which is vocalizing the chest bass. All right, so vocalizing the chest bass. How does that work? I think an important thing to understand here is that when we're dealing with vocalized chest bass, we are dealing with 2 separate frequencies. All right, we are dealing with 2 separate vibrations. A higher one, which in this case is our voice, and a lower one, which in this case is the low rattle of the epiglottis, right? The chest bass. 2 tones, 2 pitches. And what we want to do is we want to take these 2 and we want to somehow sync them up and have them work together, right? We want to harmonize them, basically. So what I'm saying is a good and clean and nice sounding vocalized chest bass is really just a successful harmony between the voice and the chest bass with a certain interval in between, right? Now, when you think harmony and intervals, you probably think crazy complex music theory. No, lucky for us, no. Because for some reason, in the human vocal tract, when it comes to vocalized chest bass, I noticed that there are really just 2 main ways that people tend to get their chest bass to sync up with their voice. Just 2 major ways of harmonizing the chest bass with the voice. Way number 1 would be to have the voice be here and have the chest bass be here. By this distance, I mean the interval between the voice and the chest bass. So I'll pick a higher note to demonstrate this one, because I'm not a chest bass master. Let's say the note with our voice is ah, and the note with our chest bass is that's a note with our chest bass. The distance between the voice and the chest bass here, if we look, is 2 octaves. So if I would just take the pitch of the voice here and pitch it down 2 octaves, we would get the note that I just did with the chest bass. So technically, if we would do these 2 together right now, they would sound pretty clean and harmonious. Let's try. That sounds pretty darn pleasing to the ears. I see a lot of people doing vocalized chest bass like that. That's one of the major ways that people tend to get their vocalized their chest bass to work with their voice. One big name that does vocalized chest bass like that I can think of is Sin. Sin does his vocalized chest bass like that. If you listen to his vocalized chest bass, his interval in the vocalized chest bass is 2 octaves like that. Super cool. The second most common way to harmonize the 2 pitches here would be to have the voice be here and to have the chest bass be here. Now, as you can see, this is a slightly shorter interval, and the distance here between the voice and the chest bass, if we look, is an octave and a perfect fifth. So it's not nearly 2 octaves. It's an octave and a little bit shorter distance. This right here is how I do my vocalized chest bass, and Bass Ventura, the very famous vocalized chest bass guy, also does his vocalized chest bass like that. I find this a little bit easier to do, maybe because I naturally have a lower voice, so the frequency of my voice is closer to the natural frequency of the chest bass. You know, that would make sense. And personally, I just find the sound of this to be a little more powerful and a little more harmonious. So let me demonstrate it now. If the voice is here and the chest bass is here, let's pick a lower note for this one. Again, because I find that more comfortable. Let's go for a Hopefully now that we understand this a little bit, we know better what it is that we're looking for, and we can also explain and understand the weird noises coming from our throats when looking for the right vocalized chest bass variation for us. Okay, so I hope that that made a little bit of sense. After all that talking, I think it's pretty straightforward how to vocalize the chest bass. Now, if you're new to the sound, experiment like a lot. That's the best way to get to know the sound and to get more control over the sound. Try just blasting out a nice chest bass and just bring your voice in and see where that takes you. If you're aiming to sound like Sin, for example, if you want to have a bigger interval, then it would make sense to aim for higher notes with your voice. Right. If you're aiming to sound like Bass Ventura, or like me, like moi, aiming for very high notes wouldn't make a lot of sense. But in the beginning though, I remember in the beginning when I was learning the sound, my chest bass wasn't very developed, so I didn't have that much control over it and it was kind of tense. And so when I was doing chest bass, it was higher pitches, like that's something to keep in mind. In the beginning, your vocalist chest bass is likely gonna sound like and it's not gonna have a lot of clarity and texture. And so that's what I want to talk about right now. Developing the clarity and the texture. How do we do it? Now, you might have noticed that I tend to bend my neck sideways kind of weirdly, like I kind of overdo it, if I'm being very honest with you. Bending your neck here is not the most important step. What is though, I think, is right amount of air and the right amount of pressure, right? If you're aiming for that clear, clicky sound like Bass Ventura, you do not want to use a lot of air and pressure when doing lower notes, and you do want to use a lot of air and pressure when doing higher notes. All right, that's how you get that clicky texture throughout your whole range. The higher the note, the more air and the more pressure you use. The lower the note, the less pressure and the less air. Sounds kind of weird, no air, no pressure, but that's really what you want. So let me demonstrate a lower note now. That was almost no air and it was very, very relaxed. Now let me demonstrate a higher note. That was a higher note and that was way more pressure and way more air as well. Bending the neck might help, but I do not recommend you fixate on that too much. 90% of your clicky texture is going to be the right amount of air and the right amount of pressure. The neck thing can help you a little bit, but it's just a little extra trick. That's basically it. A couple of important things I want you all to remember is, in the beginning, if you're new to this sound, do not push this sound. Be very, very gentle with it, all right? Gentle. You do not want to overdo it. If you overdo it and if you push your epiglottis past its limits, it can hurt for days, all right? I'm speaking from my own personal experience here. It's gonna hurt for days. Your throat is gonna be destroyed, all right? So when it starts hurting, even a little bit, I recommend just stopping, and, you know, drinking water and whatnot, taking a break, and then trying it again later. You're not in a rush. A good exercise for the vocalized chest bass is going up and down in pitch with your voice and having your chest bass follow your voice. So that would be something like it's really hard. Kind of like that. Hey everyone, so that's the end of the tutorial right there. I hope you enjoyed it. Sorry if it was a very lengthy one. I just wanted to give as much information as I can about this sound to make learning this sound and actually using this sound as straightforward as possible. I think it's nice to have a good understanding of your sounds. Thank you guys so much for your support on my first video of on this channel, the decoy bird whistle tutorial, it has like 4.2K views right now. It's actual insanity. Thank you all so much for that. Happy beatboxing.